For this video, I want to show you how to create a custom bar graph that you can use for the nutritional breakdown of your design. Now to get started, as we've done with the others, make sure you've got a layer for your nutrition and you've locked down all of your others. And you've also downloaded and can open up the nutrition for the food that you're working on. Now, for this particular data set, we don't want to use everything that's on here. We really only want to use and pick and choose some of the most important nutritional things that are evident on this. So if you look at the description, you can see this is the percentage of your daily value. And anything that's got a high percentage will be something that's good for you to eat. So in our case, I want to look for things that have the highest numbers that are on here. You don't have to use all of them, but try to pick and choose some of the more significant ones. So for instance, I can see this is high in vitamin B3, or it's high in vitamin B6, but it doesn't really have much other B vitamins, or it's a lesser amount for each of those. If I scroll on down, I can see it's really high in phosphorus, or it's really high in zinc. So I can pick and choose some of these and not have to use all of them, but I can put those into my bar graph that I'm going to work in. So the first thing I need to do is let's jump in here. Let's create our bar graph. I'm going to choose my regular column graph tool, and you can click and drag to start to create your column graph. Now when you do this, remember that it remembers the last values you typed in for when you created your last graph. And in our case, you can see it's not really showing up anything that's helpful for us. So before we move forward, I'm going to close out my data and let's reset our bar graph back to the default. Again, going up to Object, Graph, and choose Type. And let's set the value axis to uncheck the override calculated values. And we'll also draw it once for every, one tick mark for every part. We'll say OK, and this will put it back to its default value. Now we can go back to our graph and data and start plugging in the data that we want. Again, we don't have to do all of this. This is the most significant portions of it. So I'm going to copy over some of these things, like I'll do vitamin B, copy that, paste it in. Whoops, excuse me, let's go back to my data set and copy over the values as well. Now when we do the values and bring those in, make sure to get rid of the percentage sign so it's treated as a number. Do this over and over for the significant nutrition that you want to represent on your graph. I'll do copper, copy and paste that over into here too. All right, with that done, we can hit the checkbox, and this will create our little graph. Now what we want to do is we want to customize this graph. Rather than having the default columns, let's do some sort of design that's inside of it. In order to do this, we need to have a design ready to go. In my case, I drew off a simple little rice drawing. Now you can create your own drawings in Illustrator, or if you find a clip art graphic, just make sure it's a vector clip art and you can bring that into Illustrator as well. This technique I'm about to show you doesn't work well with rasterized or pixel-based graphics. So what I have is a nice little vector, and with it selected, we can go up to Object, down to Graph, and let's change the design of it. We want to save this up as a design we can use. So with it selected, I can choose New Design, and I can even rename it Rice. We'll say OK. Now I can go over to my bar graph, and I can select my bar graph. I can go up to Object, down to Graph, and since it's a column graph, we can change up the column marker. From here, we can choose Rice, and there's different ways we can bring this rice in and apply it to our design. The column type right now would be vertically scaled. So if I said OK, you can see it'll automatically scale up my rice and place it in here in place of the default column that's there. Now that will stretch it out or distort it. So sometimes if you do this type of column, instead of a vertically scaled, you can do uniformly scaled, and it'll keep it looking a little bit more like an actual rice or actual illustration that you've done. Another great one to use under your graph for column. Could be a repeating one. And with repeating, all it's going to do is it's going to repeat the amount of rice for however many units that you put it in here. So in my case, if I set it to 1 rice per unit or 1 bit, if I said OK, it's going to be kind of hard to see it here. If I turned off my, my background, you can actually see there's one little grain of rice for every unit that stacks up. Now this may be okay for what you need if there's a smaller graph, but in our case, that's a little bit too much. I think just a regular scaled graphic will work well for what we're trying to do. So in my case, I'm going to set it to be uniformly scaled. You can play around with this for the needs for yours, but this is a great way to customize the look and feel of the graphics that you have. As with all of the others, then it's a simple matter of playing around with the design of your graph and the breakdown of how you want it to be designed for your overall needs.